Welcome to our monthly ACTS Town Hall. Thanks to our member companies for helping make these town halls possible. Your support makes our mission a reality. Together in safety, stronger in collaboration. The ACTS Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. These town halls are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent via email after the town hall has concluded. Before the end of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We are pleased to have a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us today. So to get us started, our moderator will begin with brief introductions.
My name is Roger Cox, and I'm really not the moderator, but I'm proud to be here. This town hall is sponsored by Safe Stakeholder. The Stakeholder Management System, the SMS, is an award-winning cloud-based public awareness solution designed to help operators comply with RP 1162 while easing and simplifying program administration. The SMS also helps future-proof your program for RP 1185. Get a chance, check them out. We have a distinguished panel and also an outstanding moderator. And the reason I asked Dave to moderate this session is because he brings in the national perspective about enforcement versus effective enforcement. So at this time, we'll ask Dave to introduce himself, and then the panel will follow suit. Dave.
All right. Well, Roger, thank you, and good morning, all. Name's Dave Applebaum. I am with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, and among other responsibilities, I am responsible for assessing each state's deployment of effective enforcement as it relates to the excavation damage prevention safety. And so with that, I'll punt over to Matt Smith.
Good morning, I'm Matt Smith. I am the Assistant Director in the Safety and Reliability Division with the Illinois Commerce Commission. I have responsibility over our one call group and our pipeline safety group. And a little bit about me, I started out probably a little over 30 years ago working at a gas and water municipal system. And then I went there to a large utility. So I have background not only in excavation, but locating gas, water, electric, sewer. And I thought that it was pretty good to say I finally hit 30 years until Roger said that he's been 50 years in the industry. So I have a long way to go.
Miss Annette.
Hi, can y'all hear me now?
I can.
Okay, good, because I got kicked out, had to come back in. So I'm Annette Bowman. I'm Executive Director with Alabama 811. I haven't been here as long as Roger, but I started a lot younger. So I've been here 36 years, started when I was about 5, I think now, when I do back math. But I've been serving as Executive Director for Alabama 811 in some form of capacity in those years. I've also been involved with the enforcement that was implemented in Alabama in legislation in 2019, became operational in 2021, serving on the Alabama Underground Damage Prevention Authority, both as an authority member and as secretary for the executive committee. So I've been involved with the turn up in the enforcement in this element that we've got now, as well as the various forms of enforcement we had prior to that.
Then we have one more, Shane.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Shane Alexander, I'm the Director of Damage Prevention, Public Awareness. I also have meter reading operations for CenterPoint Energy. I'm off video, sorry about that. I'm having some technical difficulty being in a hotel trying to take the call. So hopefully I can stay engaged and a part of the conversation. Look forward to the discussion, and I'm thankful for the group including us in the talk.
Dave, you want to kick it off?
All right. Well, I'm going to do my best to tee this up again, and I'm hoping that this is an interactive call. Roger, again, thank you for the opportunity to host it. Well, I'm hosting it. It's really their call. It's the folks on this call. So, not a couple of weeks ago, I'm I'm driving down the interstate, and to my left, the car flies by me at a high rate of speed, and I point at the car and I go, man, that guy deserves a ticket. And where are the police when you need them, right? That I can't believe that. And I'm looking for that karma, for those lights to come on and pull that guy over and give him a ticket. 10 minutes later, I pull off the interstate, roll through a stop sign, get stopped by a cop, and give myself a ticket. And I thought, man, I deserve a warning. So, why is it, if you think about this, and I think we can all resonate with this example, which I just made up, I might add. I didn't actually get a ticket, but we always wonder, why is it always the other guy that deserves the ticket? And yet when it's ourselves, we deserve something else other than that ticket. For those of you who don't know me or know my background, my first career was as a police officer in the state of Florida, and so I often use analogies aligning with law enforcement and specifically traffic, because if you think about motor vehicle traffic, there's a lot of parallels with that in excavation safety. And this title of this is enforcement versus effective enforcement. And what I want everyone to understand is, and the questions come up, well, why is PHMSA, a federal agency, hosting this call? And a lot of people don't realize this, but the 109th Congress unanimously supported the PIPES Act of 2006. And I say unanimous, everyone in the 109th Congress voted yay to support the PIPES Act of 2006, which said, if a state doesn't use effective enforcement as one of their tools in the toolbox to mitigate excavation damages, then the federal government can ultimately have backstop authority to go in and conduct that enforcement in those states. That led to a rulemaking in 2015 that gave then PHMSA that backstop authority to, again, conduct enforcement against excavators in states that are ultimately deemed inadequate, meaning their enforcement programs are inadequate to serve the intent of the act. So my role, one of my responsibilities, is to perform, myself and a colleague, Hung Wen, from PHMSA, we perform the annual evaluations of each state's enforcement adequacy. So there is a direct responsibility each state has to meet that federal obligations. People often ask me, why is the federal government involved in? And I wanted to give a little background to that. But what really I want us to think about for the purpose of this call, hopefully a very interactive call, is when you use the term effective enforcement, we really want to get away from the term enforcement, but always add the two words effective enforcement. Studies have identified that all through history of this topic as an effective tool to minimize excavation damage. In fact, it's element number 7 in the 9 elements of an effective damage prevention program, again, tying back to the PIPES Act of 2006. So, but when we hear the term effective enforcement, I like to personally use the term accountability. And, I think every stakeholder on this call right now would agree that all stakeholders should be held accountable to ensure excavation safety. The question that varies is, what does that accountability look like? Did that driver that fly by me deserve a ticket? Did I deserve a ticket? What does that accountability look like? And I think everyone on this call has enough experience with this topic to know that accountability looks different based on a number of situations. So ultimately, I'm hoping this call really stimulates a movement, if you will, a movement to understand that there is a responsibility to hold everyone, including ourselves, accountable to following these safe excavation rules, and that we do it such that it ultimately changes, the safety culture with excavation. And so with that, that's my tee up. That's trying to warm up this audience to, what we hope to focus on in the next 50 minutes or so. And so I'll leave it at that and give it back to you, Roger.
Well, thanks. So I've already got a question. It's kind of emailed to me. There's a lot of folks got my email address for some reason. And it's really directed to you. So you talked about being inadequate. So what does the state have to do to be inadequate
Good.
or
Good,
not
good.
do?
Right. And so, right, that the answer to that question could be as short as 30 seconds or 3 hours. I'll make it just a couple of minutes. So the rulemaking in 2015 that was passed, it generated a set of rules. It's actually under 49 CFR 198.53 that says we do an annual evaluation, which then 198.55 tells us what we ask, how we do that evaluation. And there's 7 criterion in there. And without putting everyone to sleep on all of those details, there really are two key criterion within that inspection that is the subject of our focus. It has been for the last at least 5 or 6 years, as opposed to 10 years ago. And that is criterion 3, which asks, is the state using effective enforcement to mitigate damages? To reduce the number of excavation damages. So that question, is the state using it? Is it using it to ultimately prevent the reoccurring damages from excavation? That's the biggest focus we have. And then dovetailing that question is our criterion 5, which is that enforcement that's deployed, is it balanced? And again, I want to use the effective enforcement. Is the effective enforcement, is it balanced, right? You typically have 2 stakeholders when it comes to an excavation damage, the excavator and the operator, almost always by way of the locating process. So in the beginning, we were looking at states, are they using enforcement? And in the beginning, there were states that simply didn't have a program. And Roger, you know all too well, you helped build lots of these programs. I know Annette was very instrumental in building a lot of these programs. And so that was we back then, 10 years ago, we were just hoping, states were even using enforcement, to where now that's, if you will, morphed into, okay, are they using it such that it's having an impact, a positive impact? And then again, dovetailing that, is that deployment of the effective enforcement, is it balanced, right? We know, and I should say, when we look at excavation damages, unlike probably most of the stakeholders, we look at damages to gas distribution facilities. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's because that's what PHMSA has jurisdiction over. And 2, because there is prescribed rules and regulations for gas distribution, we know that the data we collect from their annual reports on damages is the most accurate and reflective of the nation. It's the best we have to assess excavation behaviors when it comes to that topic. So when we look at that, we know across the nation, roughly a quarter, 25% of all the excavation damages to gas distribution fall under the apparent root cause of locating practices. And so if you looked at that as, okay, those are violations of their respective state law and it's 25%, should the enforcement be somewhat parallel to the amount of damages? So, and it's very squishy as to how we look at that. And what we have seen, to be very honest, is it's been disproportionate. It's been very disproportionate, biased towards the excavator. So if there's 100 damages, we find often 98 enforcement cases against the excavator, 2 against the operator by way of the locator. And in many cases, it's 100 to 0. So that criterion 5 is something we put a lot of pressure on the states, on the Matt Smiths of the world, and Annettes of the world to say, we want effective enforcement to be a tool, but it's got to be balanced. So again, that's more than my 2-minute answer to your question. It's 2 of the 7 criterion, but those are the 2 that we put a lot of focus on today.
Thank you. So we've already had several questions come in. Matt, I would like to start with you on this. Dave talked about the balance, which we understand is important, but there's another balance too that at the state level, you guys have to deal with. And so we'll start with you on this. So have you balanced what PHMSA's requirements are and what your state legislature will pass or support in your state's attempt to have effective enforcement in Illinois?
So for me, as Dave said, we inspect natural gas operators, and that's kind of the only data that we truly have as far as how many damages there are, what's going on in the industry. And it is difficult because without reporting, you don't know what the data is. You don't know the areas that you need to look at. And our group is complaint driven, where somebody sends something in, we go take a look at it. And again, you start looking at data to try to figure out what the problem is. And we just don't have a grasp on that. I can remember my uncle used to be a vice president of one of the utilities, and he was an accountant by trade, always looking at data. And it used to drive me crazy because at the time I worked in the field and I'm like, well, you should know if I'm a good employee or a bad employee. Now that you're looking at a statewide amount of information, data becomes critical. And without that, it's very hard to determine, well, what areas do we need to look at? And as far as the legislature, it is very difficult to get some things through that would probably improve enforcement. That's what we encountered last year as there were some changes going on. So we almost have to kind of push back the legislature a little bit to try to figure out what can we do as a group. And I think when you start looking at effective enforcement, what we're doing, is it effective? Is it not? And I thought that we could fix this problem in Illinois much quicker. We are probably losing that battle. It's becoming worse than better. And on Tuesday, when we briefly met, David brought up a point that I wanted to kind of come back to that I found very fascinating. And he mentioned that his background is in law enforcement. He started talking about seatbelts and people using seatbelts. And I can remember growing up that, you never wore a seatbelt, and it was that 1/4 inch of padding on the dash that was apparently going to protect you. And then, as you started getting older, the laws started coming into effect. And then I can remember being with my grandparents in the vehicle, my grandma telling me that I need to put my seatbelt on, and I was probably 18 or 19, and a little bit difficult, I'm sure. And I was like, I'm not going to do it because you told me to do it. And then Dave made the comment, he said, how many of us get ready to move the vehicle up 10 feet? And he said, when you do, you automatically just put that seatbelt on. So I found that very interesting. Did some research on what was the concept from we did not have to wear seatbelts, even though they were provided in the vehicle, to today, where, if you're not wearing a seatbelt, that's very unusual that you're not. So there's a lot of takeaways, I think, that come from that we can look at as a group to sit there and say, we need to start doing some of those things. For example, one of them that I think is missed, because I also went in and researched what needs to take place for the damage prevention to improve. And one of the pieces that's missing that one of our utilities in Illinois has done for a long time is go out to the schools. You see the kids, the younger generation there, and they do training as far as what is a gas leak. If your parents are planting a tree, they need to call 811. And the person that used to work at the utility that passed away, I had conversations with her where she said it was very interesting where parents were calling her up saying, my kid forbid me from planting a tree because I had to call 811 first. So it's more than what we're doing now. We have to definitely broaden our perspective to try to figure out what else can we be doing to try to improve that. Because I would say a lot of states are in the same situation as me. What we're doing right now is not having a great impact. We have to look elsewhere, I believe.
Thanks. So, Annette, a question very similar to Matt's question is balancing your state legislature and their political perspective about constituents and such. Balance that with PHMSA's push, feels like a push for us to get better, reduce damages. And then the other piece of that are the alleged violators that you're trying to get to understand that they need to change their behavior. I mean, what's the struggle that you guys have in Alabama with all that?
I think part of it is how do you reach those audiences? You know, David's comment about being balanced. It's very easy from the 811's perspective on education to reach the utility operators, because each of those utility operators, have conferences for their industry. So it's easy to go present to them. The For excavators, it's a little bit harder because we can go speak to their organizations, but a lot of times the people who are representing those organizations are the company owners or somebody within a department, engineering department or something. It's not necessarily the excavation crews. So I think that's a little bit harder audience to educate about the enforcement. And we've been working to try to, as we've all been dealing with a lot of these large communication installs, we've been having a lot of issues, and we are having excavators respond and file complaints. It's just getting them to look at how to use that. One of the things when we put in our law, we had a task force that talked about that was established by the governors. So we had representation from about 28 different people, and we had solid representation from the excavators. And they had a valid concern that they were afraid if they were filing complaints against an operator who they were going to bid a job on next week, that would have retaliation processes for them. So we did, and it was their recommendation. It from the excavating group was being able to file a complaint for information only. And that way, if they're having the problem, that data is there. And if it becomes out of hand, then it can be looked at. And it's not just this is the first time this has been filed. And we are seeing some of those use that. Ironically, more of the facility owners are using information only as kind of a warning to excavators more than the excavators are using it. As far as legislation, we don't have a lot of pushback the way our law was written from a legislative standpoint on making those changes. There is some of freedom as far as the authority to establish a lot of their operating rules. So I think that gives us the flexibility to make the changes that we need to make when we see things within the process that may not be flowing as well, than having to go back and get it legislated. And we have done that. We've been operational since 21, and we've made a few changes as you try to think through everything initially, and we found things that we didn't look at correctly or in the process that needs to be done. So it's always going to be a living, breathing animal. I don't think anybody's going to come out of the box with an effective enforcement with no abilities to improve on the process. I think it's always going to be something that, as the dynamics change, what we're seeing as a lot of the root causes as we've gone through education processes, that's beginning to change. So I think you have to be flexible to be able to address that as it moves within the operational programs.
Hey, Shane, are you still with us?
Yes, sir. I'm still here. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. Hey, you approach it a little differently, obviously. One from a regulator, one from a board or authority. CenterPoint Energy, of course, well known, and so strategically from within your company or organization, without being proprietary, of course, strategically, you guys are having to balance with whatever the current state law and whichever state you happen to be in, you're having to balance all that. So are you seeing from your perspective, a greater focus on developing strategies to get better, or to be in line with what the expectations are, or what are you seeing there?
No, I appreciate that, and I also I just want to reiterate the importance of this conversation and being a part of it, which is a pleasure. We certainly, as an operator, hold a unique position, just as much as David was sharing before. We're regulated by the federal government. We're regulated by the state government. We have lots of opportunity to have direct oversight in those environments, and we're held to a high standard, as we should be, delivering an energy to all of our customers and to those that we care about and love as well. And that requires a lot of change by influence and by collaborating together to find some of these common grounds, as you guys have mentioned. Luckily, we live in the United States, and law takes a lot of effort to get in place. It's not an easy thing. It takes a lot of collaboration. As we were talking about the seatbelt law yesterday, and even ironically, David bringing up some of those examples. That change took a lot of time, and there were a lot of parties that had interest in that law and what was being shared. And like David had said, it takes parties to say, hey, we're willing to be held accountable. We should be held accountable, right, to do the right thing. And in order to do that, you have to have a culture shift in the organization that you're trying to influence. And CenterPoint holds a unique situation in all of our states because we participate in stakeholder groups, and as Annette was sharing, we participate in associations that help try to bring everyone to, ironically, the common ground, right? So I think about the Common Ground Alliance as one of the associations that we're a part of, who are engaging excavators more frequently. Many of you have heard the Damage Prevention Institute, or DPI, and how they're bringing excavators to the table more frequently in order for us to have these common conversations around what is a good dig law, what is a good practice. Where we've seen success, if just being transparent, is where we have all parties at the table sitting together and talking about how to make the law better for every party involved, whether that be the excavator getting the ticket where they need it, whether it be getting the locator on time, whether it be managing the volume of work and also managing the response to that volume of work. That parties have very vocal opinions, and we can come to a collaboration. And I see once those collaborations start taking place with stakeholder groups, everyone gets a bite of the pie. They have interest in what they need out of the law that's effective, and it matters to them and their organization. I, as a distributor of a natural gas product to my customer, is obviously most concerned about getting there safely and protecting our community, while also ensuring that the needs of the excavators are put as a priority to make sure that they get in and out safely, and that the product that they're bringing to the table is also delivered. So it's really important for us to have their input and insight into the conversation. So we lead stakeholder groups, we participate in stakeholder groups, and we try to make effective change through those influential discussions.
Cool. So I'm going to ask some questions that are coming directly off of the chat line. This first one is for Dave. When PHMSA audits state 811 systems, do you ask for proof of enforcement? And says hopefully a variety of excavators and utilities. So I guess that means a balance. But do you ask for proof of enforcement?
So we have done that, right? Recognize you've got some states that have thousands of enforcement cases. We will do a snapshot of, okay, show me what some of these look like. What we have not done is we haven't jumped into, okay, was that, remember the what accountability looks like varies. We haven't got into assessments of whether or not the particular type of enforcement was in fact effective and serving the mission purpose. We look at essentially anything can be enforcement, whether it's mandatory training, whether it's a warning, whether it's, got a fine assessed to it. We've even seen some where there are conditions, there's a monetary fine, but it's withheld for a period of time and dropped if behaviors are changed. There's two things I just wanted to dovetail while I've got it. One is to reinforce the culture approach, utilizing, if you will, the seatbelt, right? Matt hit the nail on the head. You go back years from not wearing seatbelts to a sincere culture shift. Well, what did it take to get to that culture change? And it took a combination of all of it, right? You can look at other topics like smoking in public. when you look at that, what changed that? Well, it involved awareness, it involved education, it involved the gloom and doom. I think we still see those commercials. You see a variety of strategies that ultimately now you break out a cigarette in public and you get the stink eye. And so you do see that. And the other point I really wanted to make was in the world of effective enforcement, we often, many folks, in fact, I would say many on this phone, look at it as the operator and the excavator. And I remind folks, I know Matt and others remind folks, there are three primary stakeholders when you talk about an excavation damage. You've got the operator, you've got the excavator, but you also have the public. And right, I use all the analogy of a gas dig in, no issues, nobody's hurt, it's repaired, all that stuff. Shake hands, let's have a training session. And you go, that's great, that was effective. And then you say, all right, but that happened in front of a daycare center. And now all of a sudden, does that change how you address that? And the reality is the public has a voice. And the only way the public can have that voice in these particular matters is through the processes that the state has in place, so that those representing the public, which are your state governments or your one-call boards or stakeholder groups, have the opportunity to take a look at that and weigh in on whatever that outcome looks like. So just wanted to jump on that. The question was, again, I think it was about, sorry, did I answer the question that was asked?
Yes.
Proof.
The question
yeah.
was, do you ask for proof of enforcement?
Got it. Not as much as I would like. Not as much as I would like is the answer.
Well, speaking on behalf of some of the boards, we think it's enough. Matt, can you explain the Illinois process? The question is directed to you, and then a comment following up. We filed a complaint in 2021 and heard nothing back.
Yeah, so our process
Yeah.
is typically that we have someone that submits a complaint. Some of the complaints are required to be submitted. There is some stuff in the law that states if you hit a gas main and there's leak, then you have to report it. At that point, our investigators receive the information. They will send out to the other party for information, request for information, whether it's photos, whatever it may be. At that point, they take a look and they make a determination, was there a violation of the law or not? And if there is not a violation of the law, then at that point, they terminate the case. They send a letter out saying that the case has been terminated. If it's a first-time offender, then they will receive a warning letter and possible training. And then if the person has violated this before, then they receive a penalty. So that's our process. On our pipeline safety side, every inspection that we do is public. You can go out, you can see every inspection, all the history, everything with it. And I really like that because it keeps us honest. We don't treat one person different than we do another one, because you can go out and you can read that. And our large utilities do read that. That's what I would like to get to with our one call side, is everything that's out there. Anybody can go look at it. They can see it. They can see who the regular offenders are, who's causing the problems. And it's no longer hidden. It's out there for everybody to see. And believe me, there's a lot of reporters that look at this stuff. We just had a case yesterday where they were looking at our pipeline safety side. So I think it would be great. It would hold people accountable. Another way to be accountable, when all of a sudden everybody sees, hey, this person has been violating the law repeatedly. What's going on?
Mm-hmm. So there are several comments now about, instead of just utility, excavator, and public, the comments have to do with the locator should be held accountable. So be handled ways in Alabama, and that, I think y'all do a little different than Mississippi does, in that you can hold a locating company in violation and assess a civil penalty against them, or does it go against the utility?
In our law, we do have a caveat that says that contract locator is subject to maintaining the to them. So we have had cases that have been filed against the third-party contract locator, and those have been hit with a penalty as well. We have some situations where they'll file it against the facility owner as well as the contract locator. Stance that the executive committee has taken is that because of that caveat in the law, they're also responsible for their respond to that, so they have been fined for that as well. The general consensus is ultimately the utility's responsibility to have that lines marked, but because we do have that caveat in there that puts it to the locators, they have filed penalties against them as well.
So Dave, that brings up an interesting question. So that's a state perspective. There's nothing wrong with it. But from PHMSA's perspective, they hold utility accountable for the rating company, or how does that work?
And again, Matt could probably answer this better than me, but the federal regulations, we look at operators, whether they locate in-house or whether they choose to contract somebody, it's ultimately that operator's accountability. So it's that states have capabilities. Third-party locator. It's always incumbent upon the operator to oversee. We don't want to see a separation of an operator distancing themselves from from the particular locating company that might be doing their work. But Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, you made the comment early on about accountability, and I've been thinking about that. We've used the term ownership probably more than accountability. And what happened, I took over in 2020, and it was sometime in 2020 where we met with all of the utilities that we regulate within the Commerce Commission. And we said, hey, we've got this problem that you're hiring someone else to do the work, whether it's a contract locator, whether it's a contract excavator, they're performing this work and you have no idea what's going on. So we said, you have to take ownership of this. You have to know what's going on. And I really thought that was going to go somewhere. Recently, I believe that I was talking to one of the utilities where I said that, you guys heard me say some words, but nothing was ever done. You are not taking any ownership. And to prove how bad it's gotten, we have advisory committee meetings. So if we make a determination and somebody doesn't agree with our determination, they can take it to our advisory committee to hear the case. And we've had one company that has stood up there and said, I'm so-and-so, and I'm going to turn this over to my contractor. I mean, obviously, zero ownership whatsoever. And even when we talk to some of our larger utilities about how is the contractor performing, they don't have any clue what's going on at all. So there is no ownership there with it. It's interesting to hear Annette talk about that they have issued penalties against the contractors. In our case, we issue it against the facility owner, and then the facility owner turns around and gives it to the contractor, which is why we're getting such pushback on penalties, because it's no longer a case of, hey, we understand we're going to get some penalties, and excavators and contractors alike are like, as long as it's a penalty low enough that's part of just doing business, we're good with it. But all of a sudden, when the penalty gets high enough, then that's when you start running into problems, and you don't get those people to the table because all they're doing is wanting to fight you in every single case. And as everybody is mentioning, it's trying to get everybody to the table, and some are willing to come to the table, while as others just are not.
Yeah, this is Shane. I'd like to go off of that a little bit too. When we talk about getting everyone to the table, and I think about like the effective enforcement programs that are out there, that we have the opportunity to hear about the boards that sort of make up those that are determining what to do with those root causes and what type of enforcement to enhance. And those models where the board is made up of representations from all parts of the industry really sort of help ensure that the accountability is held equally, and also that it's sort of brought to the forefront as to where that accountability should lie. So in the case that you were sharing a second ago, Matt, I have everyone have a seat at the table. So as an example, you might have a board that's made up of excavators, a locator, operators, of all different work groups, and allow them the opportunity to be a part of the discussion on enforcement, and even accommodating that enforcement. When you have that kind of equilibrium that we do have in some of our regions, it really does help support better discussions around the law and how to make things better. I think the point is enforcement or accountability, as Dave was leading to a minute ago, really is driving the group as a culture to want to do the right thing, not because of a penalty that's coming, but because we all have some ownership of the outcome. And I think that it's important and incumbent on us as an operator to allow folks to have that empowerment to do the right thing along with us. And stakeholder groups where we get the chance to work together and come up with legislation that where none of us really win, if you know what I mean, but we all come out with a benefit of a safer delivery and a safer community. That's where effective enforcement is born.
Well, thank you, Shane. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Annette. I've got a question for Shane.
One of the things that I think came out of our governor task force that we did when we worked on enforcement, and I also see it on our executive committee. We have a representative from the excavator community that serves on there, and he's very quick to say that we're at fault and we've got to improve. But I do think one of the best things that comes from these types of programs is there's an eye opening as you get people who begin to look at these complaints and talk about it. And even if you get those people who begin to look at what the enforcement process is, they have a better understanding for them to have industry blinders on for what they do. But when they begin to see the bigger picture, I think we've done a lot of good in better educating some of those people who are our own members who have been involved in damage prevention for years, but they don't see it outside their perspective. And when you start looking at the enforcement programs and you start looking at these complaints and you begin seeing the complexity of what's involved in each of these projects, it becomes a better awareness tool that then needs to be returned back in what we do in our education programs to be sure that people are seeing the things that these individuals who are looking at it on a daily basis are becoming aware of.
Shane, a question that we just got in a moment ago. Are third-party locators required to be OQ'd by the utility?
They are, yep. Third-party locators are OQ qualified, and that's a regulatory requirement, right? So even though I have a vendor that works for me to help with locates, there's multiple reasons as to why that might be the case, right? The best models are those that have some diversity to them when it comes to your locating. It really helps support your ability to scale up and down and situations that like what we are experiencing today with many of the large expansion projects that are going on in the United States. And those efforts really help us be able to support those fluxes and needs. But even with that, the volume's very, very heavy at times, and it's so unpredictable, as we were talking about prior to the call, just having some early conversation, having some really valuable conversations with the stakeholders around the table and talk about how we can work together. All this. An example of the Common Ground Alliance is such a valuable association is it gives folks a chance to be able to work together and tackle these issues with best practices that are being seen throughout the United States, and being partners in that discussion. So yes, to answer your question, vendors do have to be OQ qualified when they locate. So our locate partners have to be OQ qualified.
Along the same lines, a question earlier was, do locators need to be certified by states and or PHMSA, especially for natural gas pipelines? My presumption was that was an OQ question. Does PHMSA actually put their stamp of approval on an OQ program, or is that within the specific utilities?
That's a utility obligation. I think it's not with a stamp of approval, but the respective states audit those utilities to ensure folks are properly OQ'd and maintain their qualifications to do whatever the task is.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I'll add, just to continue that discussion for a second, our locators that work for us, they are us, right? It's not like I've got some sort of protective veil over us as an industry. They are a partner with us, and we've got a lot of great partners that work with us. And it's very, very important for us to also support and stand with them with some of these complexities that we're experiencing in the work environment today. And I know many people that are probably on the call recognize that there's continued opportunity for us as an industry to find ways to not only hold each other accountable, but also support each other. And there's ways that when we get at the table and we start talking about betterment of the language and legislation, that we consider the big picture, not just our own individual interest, but the big picture. David mentioned before, Shane, as an operator, it would be really good if you guys could stand up and support this type of initiative. And the truth is, we do. Many of the partners in the energy industry all are standing up, willing to say that we want better results. We want better action to be out there. But we recognize the importance of bringing everyone along with us. So stakeholder groups are critical, and those that may be on the call that are part of the industry, whether you're an excavator or an operator or a located company, whoever it is, I recommend you guys to really work together as stakeholders and be partners together. So that way you're not forced into some sort of mechanism that you feel like you're not a part of. You actually get to be a player and a partner in making things better for the entire U.S.
Roger,
Yes.
I just want a quick response to Shane there. Years ago, I had an executive at a company in a board meeting tell me, make a statement. We can't get better until we hold ourselves accountable. And I immediately responded with, "Oh, prove it." And probably not the right timing for me to say those words. But if the folks listening think about that question, somebody that says we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable, prove it. Right, it goes back to what it looks like. And I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like CenterPoint Energy bringing somebody on a call like this, saying the words that Shane said. That's what safety leadership looks like. And I think people like Matt, myself, and other folks that are the regulator side of the house recognize that. So accolades to them for their safety leadership. And I know the folks on this phone are all safety leaders, but to the question of prove it, that's what it looks like. He has proven it. So, I just wanted to highlight that.
Thanks. So we're getting within just a couple of minutes of key takeaways from each of you. Really thank you for being part of this discussion. This is one of 3 town halls over the next several months that we're going to focus on enforcement versus effective enforcement. Each one will be different than the last. So I was reading a comment a while ago from using the carrot and the stick analogy that we're all familiar with, and it certainly was dead on in what they had to say. It makes me wonder, Matt, if we inadvertently haven't been focusing on the wrong goal. The goal, apparently, for 20 years has been reducing damages. And after 20 years, even the most supportive would say we probably have not achieved the goal. So I'm wondering if the goal ought to be more strategic than just reducing damages. I wonder if it ought to be changing behavior, if it ought to be a culture shift, and what do we have to do differently to approach that? The ultimate result in culture shift or change in behavior is going to be a reduction in damages. But if all we focus on is reduction in damages, we're going to be successful or we're going to be a failure every other year. They're going to go up, they're going to go down. So are we focused on the wrong thing here? And should it be something different? And if it is, what is that? What do you think, Matt?
So, you bring up a good point, and this every year we go meet with our large utilities on the gas side. We meet with officers of the company, explain what's going on. And this year I pulled up data for the last 4 years on excavation damages. And every one of our utilities, the excavation damage is trending upward. So we are not making the positive improvement that we should be making. But we have around 61 municipal gas systems in Illinois. And when you compare the municipal gas systems, they are trending down on excavation damage. So what is it that they are doing that the large utilities are not doing? And I think it's something that we need to just, instead of just saying, oh, it's easier for them. Okay, but what are they doing? And I can tell you that there's a guy in one of the small towns in Southern Illinois that followed a crew that was getting ready to set a pole, and he stopped them and asked what they were doing. And they said, we're going to set a pole. He said, no, you're not. And they go, well, yes, we are. He said, no, you don't have a locate called in, so you're not going to be doing that. So it takes the mindset of you're going to have to be out there. You're going to be part of the solution as well. And definitely looking at our numbers, we're not heading in that direction. So there's things that we have to do. Most of my time is really not spent on the excavation damage part of it, unfortunately, but it's something that we're going to have to look at. And I have a little bit better opportunity because I have the one call side and the pipeline safety side. So the pipeline safety side is going to start dealing with that, which will free up the one call side. But again, bringing everybody to the table and getting that understanding of what can happen is very important.
Well, Shane, let me start with you. What's your key takeaway from this discussion today?
I think the key takeaway, and I hope everyone on the call understands this as well, that the word enforcement always sort of creates a run away from it. No one really wants to put their neck out there and say that we want additional enforcement or that we need oversight and all these things. But I think the message here that we need to walk away with is that enforcement, as David was sharing at the beginning, is more about accountability. And accountability comes down to everyone being a partner and holding each other accountable. Think about the seatbelt law discussion that we had. Started out as a legislative change and eventually turned into a concern about my safety and my family's safety, to the point now where I feel uncomfortable driving. I don't know if you guys have done that. You feel like you're sliding around if you don't have your seatbelt on, So it changes the approach, but we have to all be involved. It can't be one party standing on their ground, believing that they're going to make some sort of huge change in the nation. It's got to be all of us working together, being willing to stand out and say that we're going to be a part of that, and look at ourselves and say we need to improve and be a part of a lose-lose type scenario when it comes to effective legislative change. So appreciate the opportunity to be on here. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, David Applebaum. Appreciate you both. Matt, great to meet you, and Annette as well.
Annette, key takeaway.
I think one of the things, your comment about damage reduction, a damage is not always a result of a lack of enforcement or a violation of the law. So I think, when you start looking at some of this information, that using the seatbelt analogy again too, is how do we communicate this? I think that's something we all need to go back and look at, because the seatbelts, one of those things, you can touch those people as individuals. We all get in a car, we all ride somewhere and go someplace. We don't all get on the back of a backhoe and dig a hole. So we really have a much more limited audience that we can give our message to. So I think what's kind of made me think about this is how do we create that message, and being sure that people understand that enforcement, what the purpose of enforcement is. It's not a gripe session because you're mad at somebody. It's really trying to change that behavior. And how do we, as part of all, like Matt said, all the parties involved, how do we get all those to the table and look at moving this forward as a behavioral change and not just a violation ticket monetary change?
Matt?
I want to jump on to what Annette just said. It was very interesting. She said, not to come in there as a gripe session. And that's, I completely agree with that. If people are going to come in and want to change, everybody has to have an open mind. Everybody has to listen. Everybody has to have that discussion. And, I talked to you, Roger, about researching the history of the seatbelts and how did that come about. And I think that it takes some perspective from outside the industry to take a look and help us try to figure out what can we do. I think we can get there, and I think that these town halls are great, and I know some of the upcoming town halls that you have. So I'm looking very forward to it. Really appreciate the opportunity here today, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Dave, help us get better.
So I would encourage the folks here that are responsible for facilitating discussions and those interactions with stakeholders, go through scenarios. I mean, if you take this to an action item, what does the accountability, or as Matt said, what does ownership look like? And again, I'll use an analogy. Your 45-year-old spouse walks in the door and shows you that she got a speeding ticket for going 30 miles over the speed limit, and this is your spouse. What does that conversation look like? And now, next to that, your 16-year-old daughter walks in the house with a speeding ticket 30 miles over the speed limit. What does that conversation look like? And how do they differ, right? It's what does accountability look like? And you've got same result, in this case, speeding, and in our world, damage. What does the accountability look like? Exercise these scenarios. I mean, I would love to see some of these folks come up with 100 scenarios and put, mock panels together on, okay, here's the scenario. Can we come to a common agreement on what accountability looks like based on these scenarios? And I think that would be revelating. So I always like to leave these things with some type of action item, and there's your call to action, is start to mentally exercise what accountability looks like.
Very good. So, one group at the table that we don't have, and I've sat in a lot of stakeholder meetings in my years, but one group we don't have that we probably should have are the experts in culture shift or behavioral change, because we have such diverse and oftentimes opposing perspectives, that while we may just be quiet and let the conversation go on, nobody's working to change our minds or attitudes to get us closer together. And there are professionals out there, and I'm not talking about psychologists. I need one, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who have a great deal of expertise in bringing about change and change in thinking, if you will. And I think those kinds of folks could help us really in a real big way as we try to battle through some of these difficult issues we've got. Like our next town hall is going to be late locating. Depends on who you ask, they'll tell you what the problem is, and it won't be anywhere close to the other group's assessment. So we're going to have to continue to fight that battle. This battle is going to continue to be a very diverse set of problems and solutions. But in order to make this work and ultimately be successful, we're going to have to change our behavior. Otherwise, we're going to continue to just repeat what we've repeated over the last 20 years. We want to thank everybody for being a part of this discussion, especially our panelists. Thank you for your expertise. And now what we want to do is close it out.
Thanks to all of you, our panelists, and our moderator for sharing your expertise. Please take a moment now to fill out a brief survey that will be posted in the chat so we can continue to improve these discussions and address topics that are important to you. Be sure to register for next month's Town Hall by visiting our website. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month.